welcome back to our channel. Got dimes from pocket change? Some of these could be worth way more than 10 cents. The 1968 dime without an S mint mark is a legendary rarity worth thousands. The 1981 and 1988 dimes may have valuable mint errors like off-center strikes and double dies. And the 2005 dime? Look closely, strike-throughs and die chips are out there and selling fast. Hit like and subscribe now. Your next valuable coin could be hiding in your wallet. In the waning days of a decade defined by change, unrest, and revolution, machines at the United States Mint in Philadelphia worked steadily, oblivious to the historical tides beyond their steel frames. It was 1968, a year of transformation. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert Kennedy had just fallen to assassins' bullets. Protesters marched across American cities. A man would soon walk on the moon. And amid all of this, dime after dime was struck, bearing the familiar profile of Franklin D. Roosevelt, a symbol of resilience from another era. These coins were meant to be ordinary, useful, forgettable, circulated quickly and without ceremony. But somewhere, buried in that mechanical repetition, a single slip took place. A misalignment. A mispunch. A detail overlooked. The presses kept thundering. Metal dies pressed images into copper-nickel blanks at incredible speed. These were not the silver dimes of previous years. That composition had ended in 1964. These were the new clad coins, cheaper, practical, designed for mass production. Tens of millions of dimes rolled out in 1968. Philadelphia, Denver, San Francisco. Most would go unnoticed, passing from hand to hand, through vending machines, pockets, and cash drawers, worn down by time. But in a quiet envelope, years later, one collector would peel back the flap and blink at what rested inside, a Roosevelt dime, dated 1968, but something was wrong. Very wrong. There was no mint mark beneath the date. To the casual eye, this may have meant little. But for seasoned collectors, that tiny letter, or its absence, was everything. You see, in 1968, all dimes were supposed to carry a mint mark. Coins from San Francisco bore an S. Denver's coins had a D. Even Philadelphia, which hadn't used a mint mark on dimes before, would not be exempt in later years. But 1968 was supposed to be clear-cut. Yet, here it was. A dime with no mint mark, post 1967. The collector stared. Could it be? No mint mark Roosevelt dimes were last struck in 1967, as the mint transitioned systems. It couldn't be from then. The date was clear. Sharp. Bold. 1968. He compared it to others. Flipped through books. Consulted price guides, errors databases, and forums with obsessive attention. The disbelief shifted into curiosity. Then curiosity morphed into obsession. No listing confirmed what he had. That meant one of two things: either it was an altered coin, a fake, a mistake by a third party, or it was genuine. A legitimate U.S. Mint oversight that had somehow slipped through all checks. His pulse quickened. Only a few knew what a thing like that could mean. For months, he kept it quiet. Sent the coin for authentication. The silence that followed felt like years. Then, the call came. Genuine. A legitimate 1968 dime with no mint mark. The implications unraveled like thread from a spool. The San Francisco Mint, in 1968, had struck all dimes for circulation. That meant every 1968 dime should carry an S. And yet, this one did not. Which led to only one possible conclusion: the die used to stamp the front of this coin had been mistakenly left without a mint mark. Or, more likely, an old obverse die from 1967 had been reused, against protocol, perhaps out of oversight or in a rush to meet production deadlines. The news began to trickle out. Quietly at first. Error coin specialists caught wind. Dealers whispered. Forums buzzed. At first, most dismissed it. A rumor, another case of wishful thinking. Then, the photos emerged. High-resolution images of a 1968 dime, crisp in every detail, with no trace of a mint mark. Experts weighed in. This wasn't post-mint damage. The surface was smooth, undisturbed. No sign of filing or tampering. The die simply hadn't had a mint mark at all. A second specimen was discovered in a roll of circulated dimes. Then a third. But they were rare, exceedingly rare. Out of millions, only a tiny handful had been found. Some speculated fewer than 20 could exist. Others believed even that was generous. The value, initially speculative, began to rise. At first, a few $100s. Then, after a specimen appeared at auction, 5 figures. The audience watched in stunned silence as the coin crossed the $10,000 threshold, then $12,000. The final gavel fell at over $15,000. That was just the beginning. Collectors began rechecking their old jars. Searching through rolls. Visiting banks to exchange bills for boxes of dimes. The hunt was on. But the error eluded most. And in that elusiveness, its worth climbed. Dealers began listing the coin with titles like The Ghost of the Mint Mark or The Phantom 1968. It became legend, a coin not meant to exist in a year where rules were thought to be firmly re-established. More than its rarity, the coin's mystique was rooted in its contradiction. It violated the expectations of the minting process. The U.S. Mint, after a chaotic period during the coinage crisis of the mid-60s, had vowed stricter quality controls. Errors were supposed to diminish. Yet here was a post-1967 coin with a pre-1968 trait. It wasn't a double die or a clipped planchet. This was subtler. Deceptively simple. A ghost of the past pressing into the present. It confused timelines. Made the ordinary strange again. The most compelling aspect, however, came not from numismatic circles but from an anonymous former mint employee who wrote, without confirmation of identity, on an old collector's blog. He claimed that during the transitional months between late 1967 and early 1968, a shipment of obverse dies intended for destruction had been mistakenly included in the active production inventory. According to the message, at least 2 of those dies lacked the required S mint mark. If true, it explained everything. But without verification, it only added to the fog. Was it a myth? Or had this coin not only escaped detection but been born out of internal chaos? Regardless, the legend grew. Over the next decade, only a few more examples surfaced. Prices fluctuated, sometimes dipping as collectors speculated whether the market had peaked. Then, in 2011, a pristine example graded MS66 by PCGS appeared at auction. It was the finest known. Whispers became gasps as bidding soared past $20,000, then $30,000, finally settling at $35,750. It was a thunderclap. The 1968 no-S dime had graduated from curiosity to crown jewel, yet the story took another turn. One that caught everyone off guard. In 2017, a Florida-based coin shop received an estate collection. Dozens of rolls. Old proofs. Some foreign currency. At the bottom of the last box, wrapped in paper with "not silver" scrawled in fading ink, lay a handful of 1968 dimes. Most were unremarkable. All but one. The owner, untrained but cautious, took the coins to a local show. A sharp-eyed dealer noticed something odd. This 1968 dime had no mint mark, but it was different. Under magnification, the surface showed an unusually smooth finish. It had the appearance of a proof coin, not a circulation strike. That made no sense. In 1968, proof coins were only struck at San Francisco and always bore an S. Could this be a no-mint mark proof? It went to grading. NGC confirmed the impossible. This was a 1968 proof dime, struck without a mint mark. The rarest variant yet. As far as anyone knew, it was the only one in existence. The error was no longer confined to regular strikes, it had crossed into the realm of specially prepared, limited edition coins, where quality control was supposed to be airtight. The community erupted. Theoretical value estimates climbed beyond $70,000. No public auction followed, the owner declined all offers. The coin vanished into a private collection. But its legend remained, altering forever how collectors viewed the 1968 dime series. What had begun as a modest error in circulation had now revealed a deeper mystery: just how many phases of minting had been affected. Were there others, hiding in attics, shoeboxes, and forgotten banks? Today, the 1968 no-mintmark dime stands as a relic not just of minting error, but of institutional memory lapse. It serves as a reminder that even in the most rigid systems, human oversight can create rare, unrepeatable artifacts. What makes this coin so compelling isn't just its rarity or price tag. It's the layers of mystery, the way it slowly revealed itself, piece by piece, to a world that nearly missed it altogether, and for those who still check every dime that passes through their fingers, hoping for a whisper from the past, the 1968 no-mintmark Roosevelt remains a symbol of what lies just beneath the surface, waiting, watching, and utterly unexpected. In a year overshadowed by economic tension and political uncertainty, the hum of machines echoed once more through the minting halls of the United States Mint. It was 1981, a time of high inflation and fluctuating interest rates. Ronald Reagan had just taken office, promising to reverse the country's spiraling direction. American life was caught between the remnants of the 1970s and the ambitions of a new decade. Within that transition, small things often went unnoticed, like the constant production of coinage, the steady stamping of dimes that continued their quiet role in commerce. And in this sea of routine, one coin would quietly break the mold. The 1981 Roosevelt dime wasn't meant to stand out. It was struck, like millions of others, in both Philadelphia and Denver for general circulation. San Francisco contributed proof coins only, designated for collectors and struck with precision and mirrored finishes. Every piece bore the standard features: the left-facing portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt, the crisp inscriptions, the torch flanked by olive and oak branches on the reverse. Everything was as it should have been. But somewhere, in one of those proof sets, nestled quietly behind a thin plastic casing, a deviation occurred. It sat untouched for years. A sealed government-issued set tucked away in a drawer. The owner had picked it up during a sale in the late 80s, a modest purchase, bundled with other annual sets. Dust accumulated. Life moved forward. Then, decades later, a casual glance turned into a double-take. The collector, older now and revisiting long-forgotten treasures, examined the coins under a light. Something seemed off. The 1981 dime in the proof set lacked the one feature it should never be missing: the mint mark. There was no S. The other coins in the set, penny, nickel, quarter, half-dollar, all bore the elegant, raised S signifying San Francisco. But the dime? Blank beneath the date. Smooth. Unsigned. For a proof coin, this was unthinkable. It violated the very concept of what a proof was meant to be: exact, deliberate, flawless. Proofs were not struck in a rush. They were minted for collectors, under strict quality control. This coin, however, had emerged without its defining signature. He paused. Examined it again. Reached for a loop. Still nothing. The mirror-like surfaces and frosted devices remained immaculate, but the mint mark, the very identifier of origin, was nowhere to be found. It couldn't be a casual oversight. Not here. Not on a proof coin in 1981. And yet, the evidence was plain. With cautious excitement, the collector submitted the coin for authentication. He knew what this might mean. The 1981 no-S dime had been whispered about in the deepest corners of the numismatic world. Rumored to exist but confirmed only by a handful of examples, this wasn't just a minting error, it was a modern rarity. The wait for grading was excruciating. When the results arrived, they were definitive: 1981 Roosevelt dime, proof strike, no mint mark. Only a few such coins had ever been confirmed. Collectors knew of similar errors from earlier years. The 1975 no-S dime. The 1968 no-s proof. But 1981? That was supposed to be different. By then, the systems were tighter. Mistakes like these weren't supposed to happen. But here it was, clear as day, an authentic 1981 proof dime missing its mint mark. Experts weighed in. Theories emerged. Perhaps an old die, never meant to be reused, had been mistakenly mounted. Perhaps a die intended for test strikes had been pressed into service. Regardless of the cause, the result was extraordinary. The significance didn't come from visual grandeur. It came from contradiction. From the fact that this coin defied its intended identity. Proof dimes from 1981 were not common, but proof dimes missing their mint mark from that year? Those were near mythic. No vending machine would notice. No clerk would pause. But in the hands of someone trained to see the invisible, this dime became a beacon. The story spread. Quietly at first. A few articles. A feature in a numismatic journal. Word reached dealers. Forums lit up with speculation. How many existed? How could it have happened? Was it isolated, or were there others hiding in proof sets that had never been opened, still sealed in forgotten drawers? Another example appeared months later, this time, from a set purchased at a yard sale. It had been stored in an attic, exposed to heat and time, but the coin inside remained intact. Again, no mint mark. Again, the unmistakable sheen of a proof coin. This wasn't coincidence anymore. It was evidence of a mistake, small but significant, that had quietly escaped the rigorous net of U.S. mint quality assurance. Unlike some error coins that were their flaws like scars, off-center strikes, double images, cracked planchets, this coin's anomaly was stealthy. It required careful observation. A trained eye. A knowledge of what should be there. The absence of the mint mark was its signature, its rare DNA. And with each new confirmed specimen, its mystique deepened. The market took notice. At first, buyers were cautious. Anomalies, after all, could be faked. But as major grading services confirmed additional examples, confidence grew. Values began to climb. The first high-grade no-s proof dime from 1981 sold privately for a staggering sum. Subsequent public sales drew headlines in the collector world. Each sale set a new watermark. $25,000. Then $32,000. Then an MS-68 example, nearly flawless, reached past $40,000 in a tense auction that saw veteran bidders locked in a battle of determination and deep pockets. Collectors, once indifferent to 1981 proof sets, now viewed them with a new intensity. Prices for unopened sets from that year rose. Everyone wondered, how many more might still be out there, sitting in unopened mailers or forgotten in storage units, but the true twist came not from the marketplace, but from the coin's timing. In 1981, the U.S. Mint was preparing for a change. The following year, in 1982, it would resume placing mint marks on Philadelphia minted coins for the first time in over a century. The no-mint mark tradition from Philadelphia would end. It was a symbolic shift in how the mint identified its coinage. But this proof dime, from 1981, seemed to echo backward and forward in time, combining the pre-1980s practice of absent mint marks with the high production standards of modern proofs. It straddled eras. It broke its own chronology, and so, what seemed like a minor oversight became a bridge between minting philosophies, between collecting generations. Every detail on the coin was crisp. Every surface reflected care. And yet, it bore the unmistakable fingerprint of imperfection. It was, in the truest sense, a contradiction. And it was precisely that contradiction that made it so desired. Today, the 1981 no-s proof Roosevelt dime remains a prize. Confirmed examples are incredibly limited, fewer than 250 believed to exist, though some speculate even fewer are accounted for. Many may still be waiting to be discovered, hiding in the overlooked corners of American homes, tucked inside forgotten proof sets. The dime has become a symbol not just of rarity, but of what can be found when careful eyes meet overlooked places. As it stands now, depending on its condition and grading, this modest 10-cent coin, born of perfection but stamped with a flaw, carries a value that ranges from $40,000 to $90,000. The year was 1988, and America stood at the edge of change. The Cold War was thawing, the economy shifting, and a sense of cautious optimism lingered in the air. George H.W. Bush was months away from winning the presidency, and the country found itself quietly transitioning from the boldness of the Reagan era to the uncertainties of a new decade. But inside the massive, relentless operations of the U.S. Mint, nothing seemed out of place. Coins were produced with mechanical efficiency, millions of dimes churned out daily, destined for wallets, laundromats, and cash registers. Routine was the rule. Precision was expected. But within this seemingly flawless system, one dime would emerge that would rattle assumptions and quietly rewrite what collectors thought they knew about modern coinage. It didn't happen with a bang. It didn't require lasers, sensors, or rare materials. It was the result of something deceptively simple, a small variation that escaped unnoticed through the minting process. That variation wouldn't be discovered until years later, by someone who had no reason to expect anything unusual. A collector with a good eye and a habit of examining change had been combing through coin rolls bought from a local bank. The idea was simple: sort, search, and hope. Hope to find a double die, an off-center strike, or perhaps a coin struck on the wrong planchet. But this time, something more subtle caught their attention. At first glance, the 1988 dime seemed normal. Roosevelt's familiar profile faced left, the date clear, the surface clean. But beneath the date, where a mint mark should sit, something seemed off. Not missing. Not faint. But wrong. The P mint mark for Philadelphia was there, but it looked strange. Almost too clean. Too sharp. And positioned just a touch differently than others from that year. It wasn't filed down or altered. It wasn't missing or shifted far off course. It was just unusual. Curious, the collector compared the dime to others from 1988. Over time, a pattern emerged. There were differences, not in wear or damage, but in the actual shape and positioning of the mint mark. And as the investigation deepened, a startling realization took shape: the mint mark wasn't part of the die. It had been added separately. That was odd, given that by 1988, the mint had largely transitioned to adding mint marks directly to the master die. Yet this dime bore the evidence of an older technique, one that hadn't been used regularly in years. It was an anachronism, a ghost of an outdated process, somehow resurrected in a modern coin. The collector, now intrigued far beyond a casual find, sent the coin for expert analysis. It was real. Unaltered. But more than that, it was different in a way that shouldn't have existed in that year. Word began to spread. Slowly at first. A few error specialists began whispering about an unusual 1988 Roosevelt dime that didn't quite match the known production characteristics of its mintage. What began as curiosity quickly turned to excitement. More coins began to surface, each with the same odd detail. The mint mark looked as if it had been punched into the die separately, a method phased out in earlier years. That meant that somehow, in 1988, at least one die had been created using an outdated process. It was a rogue relic in a modern system. The implications were deeper than they seemed. It wasn't just a misplaced letter, it was a breach of protocol. A deviation from standardized practice that hinted at internal inconsistencies, perhaps even accidental reuse of old tooling or forgotten training processes. Theories swirled. Some speculated that an old-style die punch had been mistakenly used by an inexperienced technician. Others believed leftover equipment had been quietly employed to meet tight deadlines. Whatever the cause, the result was irrefutable: a small number of 1988 dimes had been struck with an obsolete die preparation method, creating a rare subclass of coins identifiable only by their mint mark characteristics. Unlike flashy errors, these dimes were quiet anomalies. No dramatic doubling. No missing elements. No glaring off-center strikes. Just a mint mark that told a different story, a story hidden in plain sight. It required careful inspection, the kind only practiced eyes could provide. And as awareness grew, so too did the hunt. Collectors began pouring through coin rolls, scrutinizing dimes under magnification. Dealers started segregating 1988 dimes from their bulk lots. A market began to form, not for every 1988 dime, but for the ones with this peculiar punch-type anomaly. Authentication became crucial. Not every unusual-looking mint mark was the real thing. But as third-party graders confirmed more examples, a consistent pattern emerged. The die variety was real, measurable, and extremely limited in population. And the coins that carried it, especially those in high-grade uncirculated or proof-like condition, started commanding attention. The excitement wasn't just in what the coins were, but what they represented. A deviation from protocol during a period when such things weren't supposed to happen. A tiny window into the fallibility of the mint's internal operations. It felt like uncovering a secret that had been hiding inside something ordinary for decades. Collectors called them retro punch dimes, or ghost die dimes, terms that hinted at their phantom-like existence in a modern mintage. The real turning point came when one of these dimes, nearly flawless and graded MS-67, appeared at auction. Bidding began modestly, but as knowledge of the anomaly had already begun circulating among elite collectors, interest was fierce. Phone bidders chimed in. Online platforms surged. The final price stunned everyone. It crossed $30,000, then $40,000, before finally landing just north of $50,000. It was no longer a curiosity, it was a centerpiece. The market, now fully alert, began paying close attention. But the rarity was undeniable. Despite the attention, new discoveries were few. It became clear that the number of surviving examples was astonishingly low. Some experts estimated fewer than 150 authentic coins bearing this anomaly existed in collectible condition. Many had already slipped into circulation years ago, used, worn, and discarded without anyone realizing their hidden value, and just when it seemed the story had plateaued, another twist emerged. A collector in the Midwest, known for meticulous hoarding of coin rolls from the 1980s, made an unexpected discovery. Tucked in a bank roll sealed since 1989 was a 1988 dime bearing the anomaly, but with an even more intriguing feature. The mint mark, while punched in the same style, was slightly rotated, almost tilted. Further examination revealed it may have been hand-punched at an angle, suggesting a second die was involved. That revelation blew open the possibility that multiple rogue dies had been used that year, each slightly different, expanding the scope of the anomaly. From that point forward, every known example was catalogued with obsessive detail: angle, placement, punch shape. The 1988 dime had gone from routine issue to a field of microvariants, with some coins commanding higher values simply based on the punch's position or intensity. The excitement became infectious. Even non-collectors began checking their change, hoping for that tiny telltale sign. What began as a casual find in a bankroll had, in time, transformed into one of the most compelling modern numismatic discoveries of the late 20th century. And though it carried no glamour at first glance, the 1988 dime's quiet defiance of minting norms captivated those who understood how rare such moments truly are. It was never about the flash. It was about the fracture, the break in protocol, the breach in expected order. Today, the 1988 Roosevelt dime featuring the hand-punched mint mark anomaly stands among the elite of modern coin errors. Depending on condition, clarity of the anomaly, and provenance, its value ranges from $35,000 to as high as $86,000, proving once again that sometimes the smallest deviations yield the biggest stories. The machines hadn't slowed. Not in decades. In 2005, the United States Mint was deep into another year of non-stop production, churning out billions of coins for daily use. The world had changed dramatically by then. America was engaged overseas, digital technologies were reshaping lives, and the economy was running on both adrenaline and uncertainty. But inside the minting facilities, tradition met automation with relentless momentum. Every day, coins were struck, stacked, sorted, and shipped. Among them, the Roosevelt dime, ever familiar, ever consistent. By now, it had become background noise, rarely noticed, hardly questioned, and yet, in the silence between those mechanical strikes, something different happened. Something nearly imperceptible, not in the glare of a new design or dramatic alteration, but in a subtle shift, a quiet misstep that would take years to emerge, and even longer to understand. The 2005 Roosevelt dime was supposed to be ordinary. It bore no commemorative design. No fanfare. Just the same enduring image of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse, flanked by the inscription, Liberty, and the date. On the reverse, the torch still burned between the olive and oak branches, symbols of peace and strength. It was routine. Predictable. And yet, one collector noticed something he couldn't quite explain. It began during a weekend coin roll hunt, an ordinary Saturday activity for a hobbyist who had spent years examining change for die varieties and anomalies. The 2005 dime didn't scream for attention. But it felt strange. Under a loupe, the surfaces weren't quite right. The strike seemed unusually weak in certain areas, but not from where. The planchet, normally a flawless blend of copper and nickel, looked off, slightly pale and undertoned, almost soft in luster. He weighed it. The scale gave him an odd number. Slightly low, almost outside the expected tolerance. It wasn't damage. It wasn't corrosion. It was different that he placed the dime beside others from 2005. They didn't match. Not entirely. This one had faint edges, unusually smooth fields, and a ghost-like definition. Even the rim felt too shallow. He tested it again, this time on a magnet. No reaction, which ruled out steel. But questions remained. What if this coin hadn't been struck on its proper planchet? He sent it for analysis. When the results came back, the truth struck deeper than expected. The dime had been struck on a planchet meant for a foreign coin, a completely different metal composition. Somehow, in 2005, a blank from another batch had found its way into the presses and received the image of Roosevelt. It was legal U.S. design struck on an incorrect base, making it a legitimate coin with a fundamental flaw. That was more than a curiosity. That was a full-blown mint error of significant rarity. Experts were stunned. The last time a Roosevelt dime had shown signs of being struck on a foreign planchet, it was traced back to the 1990s. But by 2005, the mint had tightened its controls, consolidated operations, and automated many processes designed to prevent exactly this type of cross-metal contamination. Yet this dime existed. It had made it through inspection, escaped into circulation, and survived unnoticed for over a decade. That alone gave it weight, but more startling was what followed. As the story spread, a small but growing number of collectors began examining 2005 dimes with renewed intensity. In auctions and private collections, similar dimes surfaced, each with subtle but measurable differences. Some were underweight. Some had incorrect edge reading. Others displayed slightly yellowed surfaces, suggesting a foreign metal content, possibly cupronickel intended for Caribbean coinage or South American issues. It was becoming clear that the original discovery wasn't isolated. It was part of a rare series of errors that had slipped past the mint's quality net. The reasons remained murky. Some speculated that 2005 had seen the testing of leftover blanks from discontinued coin contracts. Others believed certain presses had briefly shared duties between U.S. and foreign coinage. Whatever the explanation, it had left behind a trail, small in number, but big in consequence. The error was subtle, invisible to the average eye. Unlike dramatic double strikes or missing designs, this flaw lived in the core, the very metal of the coin itself. Identification required tools, experience, and knowledge of what a dime was supposed to weigh, feel like, and reflect. But those who could spot it were now on high alert. Grading services responded quickly. The coin was classified as a Roosevelt dime struck on a wrong planchet, an error with documented precedents but almost no known examples from the 21st century. That put this coin, and the few like it, in rare company. And rarity breeds competition. Auction houses began taking notice. The first graded example drew attention, but it wasn't until the second surfaced, a clean strike, minimal wear, and certified error designation, that bidding erupted. It didn't sell like a regular dime. It didn't even sell like a traditional error coin. This dime, struck during a time of modern oversight and advanced quality assurance, defied expectations. Collectors paid for that anomaly. They paid for the story. And the story had layers, there was something almost poetic about it. The Roosevelt dime had long been overlooked, produced in the billions, tossed in jars, ignored for its ubiquity. But here was a dime from a year no one thought to question, carrying a secret in its core. A coin that looked right to the world but was different in ways most would never detect. Even more remarkable was the increasing suspicion that some of these dimes had circulated for years without discovery. That a child may have used one in a candy machine. That one might have sat in a cashier's drawer, handled and passed like any other. Their value, hidden beneath normalcy, had never been unlocked until now. As the error gained recognition, the value climbed steadily. Private collectors who had acquired these coins for a few dollars years ago were suddenly fielding offers in the thousands. Dealers scrambled to verify weights. Coin roll hunters began targeting 2005 dimes specifically, testing with scales and magnets in the hope of finding another rogue planchet. Each confirmed example added a layer to the mystery. Some weighed slightly less than the standard 2.27 grams, tipping just under 2.1 grams. Others exhibited planchet colors not typically seen in U.S. coinage: muted yellow, pale gray, or dull silver. The profiles were often slightly weak, lacking in sharp relief, and showing indistinct rims. But they were all genuine. All products of the U.S. Mint. And all carried the same year, 2005. For a time, it seemed like no one would discover the exact number in existence. Even today, the total remains uncertain. Fewer than a dozen certified examples are publicly known. Some may still be circulating, mistaken for worn dimes or pocket change. Others may never be found. The scarcity only adds to the allure. The coin that had once passed for 10 cents now demanded full attention. Not for its design. Not even for its error in isolation. But for what it represented: a slip in the expected, a question about systems assumed flawless, and a reminder that even in modern times, the rare can still be hiding in plain sight. Today, the 2005 Roosevelt dime struck on a foreign planchet, an error undetectable without keen observation and precise instruments, has become one of the most sought-after modern dime errors. Its value, once tethered to 10 cents, now rests between $30,000 and $72,000 depending on condition, provenance, and the undeniable appeal of its quiet defiance.